Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think we'll wait a couple of minutes for people to move. Yeah, you did the sound check already, so it's good.
Ja. 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 Men hovedsædet, det er stadigvæk deroppe i København. Ja, ikke for vores. Nej, okay. Ja. 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 Det er nemlig, ja. 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 Men det er ikke atypisk. Ja, jeg tænkte med hovedsædet. Det er hele tiden. Så er det lidt svært at sige på. Men altså, det var jo vi sad faktisk i Danmark. Ja. 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 Og vi så gerne eksponere der. Det ville de så ikke være med til. Så sagde vores founder, at man får Sverige. Så blev vi bare dumt altid, så helt til år. Ja. Og har lige det er sådan småt. Og så Danmark er jo tæt på også København. Ja. Der er mange, der flyver ind, og så er det vigtigste også. Ja, det er det. Ja. Så er det frisk, som man går med. Nej, man får jo med. Så kan man få det, der gør det. Ja. Det er så det er ligesom Billund. Om Vigo, ja. Integration. Så om det er
Sorry, that was a little bit loud. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Our second last session today. Again, I can't stress enough to express our gratitude to our hosts in both Malmö and Copenhagen and the entire greater Copenhagen region for the last couple of days, which have been, a very delightful experience for all of us. Today, in this session, we'll be discussing navigating the talent tides, so how to address labor and skills shortages, which in fact is one of the major challenges across communities across the OECD, but also in countries beyond the OECD. We see in our work, in our conversations, in our daily lives, that employers decry enormous difficulties in finding skilled workers, which has direct consequences for firms, for their operations, investment decisions, attracting foreign direct investments and so on, but certainly also in terms of local economic growth. One thing, and I should emphasize that at the lead directing committee, the directing committee of our part of the OECD on Monday, we had a dedicated session on this. One thing that stands out is that the nature and the drivers of these labor and skill shortages are very much place-specific. They can be structural, cyclical, they can be due to aging, changing worker preferences, new technology arising, and so on. The main implication for us in this room, perhaps, is that the actions and policies to address those issues, therefore, also should address those local drivers and real causes of these labor and skill shortages. Now, that's enough for me for today. With our great panel today, we want today to look a little bit closer into some of those challenges and possible actions and policies illustrated by local examples and experiences. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. But before we do so, I just want to point out that we have several rounds of questions and discussions. But we will also give you, the audience, the chance to raise questions at the end. So if you have a burning question, take note before you forget, and you get the chance to ask those questions. Great, and I move over. Yes, so I'd like to introduce our six panelists today. Perhaps I start on the right. From Japan, we have Makoto Fujimoto, the Vice Research Director of Career Development at the Japanese Institute for Labor Policy and Training. Moving on, we have the Sedat Arif, the Deputy Mayor of Malmö, responsible for the labor market policies and social services. Thank you very much for coming. Then we have Jette Jørgensen, who's the managing director of Inca Group, part of IKEA, and really bringing the voice of the private sector here to the table as well. Then to the left of Jette, we have Jens Christian Lutgen, the mayor of Copenhagen, in charge of employment and integration. And we have Johan Kreitzberg, head of public affairs, Engineers of Sweden. And last but not least, Maria Schischken, project manager of Wachstumsregion Ems-Achse, which is a region in northwest Germany. Well, thank you very much for coming. Before we dig deeper into the questions and the discussions, we have a short presentation from Mr. Fujimoto on the experience of Japan, which might give us some inspiration, as Japan is perhaps the OECD country that has for the longest period been experiencing demographic change, aging, and consequentially labor shortages. I'll hand over to you now. Well, bear with us for a second. Okay. Then I think what we do the questions first. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Sorry, apologies for that. There's been a small technical hiccup here, which gives us more time for discussion, in fact, and mixes up a little bit the structure of our session in the first place. So, the first question that I think we've been hearing a lot, we see this in the data in our analysis as well, is that labor shortages really seem to have come to the fore in the post-pandemic recovery period. So could one of you, all of you, perhaps explain how you in your daily life, in your work, see this taking place, and to what extent labor shortages, skills shortages today might be different from similar difficulties we experienced and faced before COVID hit?
Please. In the city of Malmo, we have a really complex situation where we at the same time as we see the changes of the demographics happening really fast in our society, we also have a situation where we have an unemployment rate which is approximately 12%, which means that we have a lot of people that needs to work, but they don't have the right training in comparison. For example, we have a branch within the high-tech programming that is developing in our city, but at the same time, we, in a long time of period, we've had people coming from other countries that don't always have the education or training to take the jobs that are being developed in our city. So therefore, we have a problem of mismatch, where we have the jobs, but the citizens don't have the right education. So we are focusing very much on actually cooperating with private companies to see if we can do a lot of things together. And there I can tell you about one example that we have in Malmo is the job tracks, where the companies are setting up the rules on what kind of labor what kind of people that can do the jobs in their company, and we help them in the educational programs to educate them. Usually it takes 12 to 24 weeks to educate them, and the companies promise to hire them, which means that 80% of the citizens of our city end up having a job after these vocational courses. So this is one good example, but we have a complex situation where we see demographic going down, but at the same time we have a high unemployment rate in our city.
Thank you very much. A very interesting example, and I think we'll probably come back to this collaboration with the private sector, because I think most people in the room might have specific questions on how this unfolds and how you identify the specific needs and the target groups, etc. I pass on the question to anyone else who would like to comment. Okay. Maybe Jette first.
Yep, I can take that question as well. I come from Inca Group, which is the largest franchisee from IKEA. So we are around 170,000 co-workers in our company. So you can imagine that we have also a lot of things to do when it comes to reskill and upskilling and so on with the things that has happened. Because before pandemic, we were very much known as a very large cash and carry company, meaning that people would come to our stores and buy our goods and take it home. And then suddenly, from one day to another, we were closed down. So that was, of course, also requiring that we as a company needed to make some decisions. We needed to look into automation. We needed to make sure that our co-workers' health and well-being was still okay. And so we also, all of us, had to really be super flexible in adjusting to the change in society. And I think it has also helped us as a company really to look into how things can happen so fast and that you actually don't have any influence on it, but you have to adapt. Because, of course, we are still wanting to run our business in the best possible way, also to live up to our vision to create a better everyday life for the many people. So that was a big challenge for us, but really working with people. And then if I look at past pandemic, I actually see a challenge of people who do not want to move in the same amount as we saw before. So that's also something that I think we need to relate to. People would like to stay where they are. So really, really interesting also to listen to what the local authorities will do also to help us as a company to make it attractive to stay also.
Great, thank you very much. This issue of lacking labor mobility, the unwillingness or inability to move, we'll come back to this, but it's fantastic that you already alluded to it. We move on, Hans Christian.
Yeah, thank you. I think the situation here in Copenhagen is a bit less complex than in Malmö, because here we just have the shortage of labor, also very low unemployment rate, and we can see that the shortage is both when we talk about highly skilled labor, engineers, all these kind of professions, which is lagging all around the globe, but also when we talk about persons who could work in restaurants, hotels, service sector, there's really a huge shortage in labor. And what we try to do is, of course, we have unemployed people, try to give them the skills so they can go in and take these positions. The amount of people unemployed is not that high, so we're also trying to attract from abroad. From Sweden, for instance, there are still a lot of obstacles, even though we are two countries very close to each other. We have the bridge. There's still a lot of obstacles when it comes to taxation, a lot of practical issues, which makes it less attractive. Even though the salaries are higher here in Denmark, the currency is stronger, there's still some obstacles. And I think it's a little bit to do with what you said, that the willingness to move is not that high. Not in distance, but when it comes moving to another country just for working or commuting back and forth, there is an obstacle, and it might increase during the years. But anyways, we see a lot of young people from Southern Europe go here to Copenhagen to work, and if you guys go out tonight to visit a bar or restaurant, you'll find a lot of persons working behind the bar as waiters, etc., who's not from Denmark, but from Southern Europe. So this is the way we try to find a solution in the short run, but we can also see this pool of potential candidates is getting smaller and smaller because the populations are decreasing in the countries where we traditionally get foreign labor from instance, from Eastern Europe and also from Southern Europe. So we have to do something with the persons we have outside the labor market here in Denmark in order to bring them into the labor market, because the quick fix with labor from abroad, eventually that would also run out, I think.
To elaborate on the last point, you really nicely framed it in terms of dividing into short-term solutions and medium and long-term solutions. Yeah. The people outside of the labor market in Copenhagen, and anyone might want to come in on this, is what are sort of the main target groups that you think would be most realistic to mobilize in the near or medium term?
I think we see the tendency here in Denmark, as in the rest of Western Europe, that there's quite a substantial group of young people who are outside job market, no education, but many of them with mental issues, and that's being the main cause why they are outside the job market and don't get an education. And I really think we have to work with the group, because if we don't get them into the job market as young persons, then they won't get into the job market at all. So this is really a main priority, and it's almost a pandemic of mental health issues we see in this group. In Denmark is 43,000 persons we're talking about. So quite a lot of young people in a small population as the Danish population. And this is also, I know it's one of the priorities for the government to work with this group. And I don't think anyone in Western Europe has the solution or the answer what to do with this group. Everyone is talking about it, but we have not found the solution yet.
Yes. No, we've talked about a little before. I represent engineers in Sweden, and engineers are somehow in the center of this skill shortage discussion. And what has happened compared to previous years, at least among our members, and that is very different from other occupational groups, is that remote work has done very much in this aspect. So, I mean, if we've conducted some surveys among our members who say that, well, they can accept to commute about 1 hour one way if they're supposed to be at work every day. But if they're supposed to be at work 2 times a week, and they can work the rest of the time remotely, they are prepared to work, have a much longer distance to work. So in just since 2021, in 3 years, the average distance from our members from their homes to their workplace has increased by more than 10 kilometers. And it has been one thing is that they don't move to Denmark, but they certainly work in Denmark. I mean, in the southern part of Sweden, it has been much more attractive to, because at least when they in the workplaces where they accept remote work, it has been much more attractive to work in Denmark if you live in Malmö and Lund compared to when you were had to be there 5 days a week. And as you were talking about, I mean, there is quite a substantial wage difference between Denmark and Sweden, and so it's very attractive for engineers to work in Denmark. But of course, not everyone does it. But the interesting thing is also we can see a tendency that the wages in Malmö are increasing for engineers because of the increased competitions.
Just picking up on this last point on how remote work, you focus on the example of engineers, has perhaps provided a solution for to fill some of these gaps. Have you seen this also really being applied in more remote areas? So are we talking of places like Copenhagen or Malmö benefiting from this trend, or has it become sort of a tool for places that perhaps historically have struggled with like the attractiveness, local quality of life, access to services? Apply this.
Certainly, we can see in other parts of Sweden too that it has increased. I mean, the distance from home to work, but it goes 2 ways, because the thing is, previously, if you take the northern part of Sweden, it has been hard to attract people to move there, and now it's been easier maybe to get people if they work remotely. But on the other hand, it's not so. Before, the companies have been pretty sure that, well, the people here who are engineers in the northern part of Sweden, they won't move. So, but now they are comparing their wages to wages in Stockholm and things like that. So it goes both ways.
I'd like to bring in Maria, Maria, because this fits nicely your place of origin, the Emsachse, which is a rural region in northwestern Germany and a cross-border region at the same time. So what has your experience been?
Okay, so we are not only a region, we are also an association of municipalities, educational institutes, chambers, and over 800 companies. So we work with a lot of companies hand in hand. And what we can see after post-COVID, there is a tool in Germany which is called Kurzarbeit, short-term work. It's governmental funded, and people in a bad economical state can use it. And we can see that a lot of companies use it post-COVID to keep their employees, either to terminate them. And yeah, this is what we saw after COVID more than before.
The option of remote work that was mentioned, is this something that you're experiencing with? I think you must perhaps also encountered some limitations in terms of scaling it up in companies and so on.
Yeah, we had a project actually together with the OECD on teleworking in our region, but we see there's still a lot of work needed to do. We need to talk more to the companies. There is teleworking in office jobs, but in the other areas it's hard to bring people into teleworking. And also we build up a platform for co-working spaces in our area, but we see that the co-working spaces are not used as much as we would like to use them. But this is maybe also because we live in a rural area and houses are big, people have an office at home. Employers should see the positive effects of co-working spaces. People would interact more in these co-working spaces, which is better than only working from home.
Thank you very much. I think we've overcome our technical difficulties, is that right? And we'll switch the order slightly. So Mr. Fujimoto would like to share some lessons from Japan on how Japan has been addressing labor and skill shortages in local areas, in rural areas. So we have around 10 minutes for this presentation. Thank you.
I'm sorry for technical miscommunication. So I think it is very famous that Japanese people can't speak English, of course, in spite of long time education. Of course, I can't speak English well, so I apologize to the audience my poor English in advance. Well, I'm Makoto Fujimoto. I'm a researcher of Japanese Governmental Research Institute. Today, I would like to introduce problems in Japanese local area about labor force and skills, and to introduce initiatives and policies for problems. Some aspects may be in common of other OECD countries, and some aspects may be Japanese, maybe special for Japan. Oh, okay. And now, Japanese local area have common problems concerning labor force and skills as follows. First, labor shortage due to declining population. Population decline due to declining birth rates is particularly pronounced in local areas. So labor shortage is pronounced especially in local area. Second, wage escalation. And domestic prices in Japan are rising because of Russia-Ukraine wars, depreciation of Japanese currency, and so on. rising domestic prices have encouraged the government to raise wages. However, SMEs, small and medium enterprises in local areas have difficulty in rising wage. Third, need to upgrade skills. To make the local economy sustainable, in common with other OECD countries, it is necessary to respond to technical innovations such as DX, digital transformation. It is needed to maintain competitiveness in the labor market too. Fourth, aging population. More pronounced in local areas in Japan. Aging makes it difficult to respond to technical innovation. So, I would like to introduce case of Hiroshima Prefecture as a typical example of Japanese local area suffering from labor and skill shortages. Japan has 47 prefectures. Hiroshima Prefecture is one of them. This is overview of Hiroshima Prefecture. Prefecture in Western District of Japan, the place of G7 summit last year. Population is 2.73 million. And this prefecture has 2 World Heritage Sites, Miyajima Shrine and the Atomic Bomb Dome. And about industry, the automobile and shipbuilding industries are saving. And in recent years, the number of foreign tourists has been increasing. Before COVID-19, 2.8 million in a year. This is Shrine, Miyajima Shrine, World Heritage. And this is soccer stadium of Peace Wing. Hiroshima has a professional soccer team, and Danish player and Sweden player were in team. And present field manager is German. The trend of population in Hiroshima Prefecture, this is the main problem. Total population of the prefecture peaked in 1995 has continued to decline. The percentage of the population aged over 65 have increased by more than 10% from 2000. And this is the most problem. Population flow to outside of prefecture is the highest in all Japanese prefectures for 3 consecutive years. Last year, 2023, over 10,000 people moved away. But actually, I moved away from Hiroshima to Tokyo about 35 years ago. Well, I'd like to show you some initiatives for labor forces and skills in Hiroshima Prefecture. First, the policy about new skill development. Initiatives of Hiroshima Quest have been implemented from 2020 as a platform to develop human resources, mainly targeting digital natives. Digital native, you may hear this word, means an young generation who use digital and AI naturally. They are mainly teens and 20s. Hiroshima Quest 4 opportunities are available. E-learning and hands-on training provide experiential training opportunities with experience such as AI applications and so on. And idea competition for business plans using data analysis and AI, and commercialization support. Another policy for new skill development is to encourage re-skilling. In Hiroshima, the council about re-skilling was set up. the council discusses the skills that prefecture workers should acquire and the role of business and government in promoting reskilling and home rates policies. And another one, the prefecture government are operating a certification system for reskilling. Certificated companies are more likely to receive public subsidies for human resource development. Second, I'd like to show you policy for labor shortage. This is for retaining foreign workers. Hiroshima Prefecture accepts many foreigners, but there is also large outflow, like Japanese. So, local government supports the efforts of such companies to retain foreign workers and use their efforts as a model for other companies. Content of support is financial support for efforts to improve Japanese language skills of foreign workers, and assistance in developing a plan to qualify for long-term employment of foreign workers. Finally, I would like to highlight future challenges for Hiroshima Prefecture's policy. These challenges are common to other prefectures in local Japan. First, accountability for policies. New skills such as AI skills in short-term demand may be small, so accountability for policies may be needed for people in prefecture. Second, shortage of leaders who can utilize new skills. There is also shortage of human resources in local areas who can utilize new skills to lead business innovation. Third, improvements for long-term retention and human resources development foreign workers. The need for foreign workers is increasing in local area including Hiroshima, but environment for the long-term retention and human resources development is not yet fully developed all over the China. Not only Hiroshima, but also other prefectures in Japan. Thank you very much for your time and intention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Makoto-san, for the presentation. It was quite interesting because it was linking up to some of the issues that were discussed over the last 2 days and perhaps also brought up today. The issue, of course, upskilling. I think also a paradigm shift for in Japan and shifting the attention towards attracting and retaining foreign workers. I think that there was also a point that was made on the situation in Copenhagen, and not the least, I think the interesting linked with the private sector working in collaboration and the role of local leadership. Thank you very much. I'd like to come back to some of the questions some of the topics that were already raised in the first round of interventions, namely geographic mismatches, or perhaps framed differently, limited labor mobility. Jette, you mentioned this, do you really notice this as a major bottleneck and difficulty in your work? What do you do to overcome it? How do you convince people to move or take on a job that whose location might not be their first choice?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because we are talking about many different people, also coming from many different countries also. So of course, location can be one thing that can be interesting for people, and the safety in a country can attract also. It's also about taking care of, maybe you don't come alone, so what's going to happen to my partner and my children? So how can we make that attractive as well? Because I think you can probably convince yourself that you will succeed at work, but if your family situation is not part of it and as successful, it will not work for the totality. So that part is of course also very important. So we are right now actually setting up a small pilot in Helsingborg, working together with the Helsingborg international community, where we are asking our spouses to our co-workers, what would you actually like? Because we also see that we have a lot of talented people that we are not actually using. They come with the talent, but they are actually not getting into the labor market. It's their partner who's joining the labor market. So I was just sharing before also with you that we actually sent out this survey among our co-workers in Helsingborg, and we asked, we said we will have 10 people who can join this pilot, and within 1.5 hours, 50 people applied. So there's a really, really big need for this, that we're actually looking into this together. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Then, of course, I also work, as you know, as I said, with global hubs. So it also means that we have locations around the globe. So it can also be that you can actually be a bit more flexible within your work force, that you might not have to work in that country where you are needed, but you can actually maybe join one of the other hubs that we have across the globe. So really also trying to be flexible in that way.
2 points that we take away, right? I mean, raising flexibility on an employer side, but also thinking about a comprehensive plan, not for workers, but entire families, to make places attractive and offers attractive. So that I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, I wanted to get back actually to the questions that Christian was lifting before. It's the practical problems that we have, where there's a policy that if you're not a Swedish citizen, you cannot work on the Danish side. At the same time, we have a problem with the transportation also, where you don't have enough of trains moving between Copenhagen and Malmö, for example. Then, if you want to attract companies, how do you solve the housing problem? Because we have a huge problem in the whole of Sweden, actually, maybe in Denmark also, when it comes to housing. How do we solve that? And it's very often frustrating as a municipal politician, because these questions are very often connected to national policies. And that's, I've been criticizing even my own party when they were in government, and I'm criticizing the government right now about this, because we don't see enough of new policies to remove the hinders that we are experiencing right now within the labor market. And this is something I would like everyone to talk more of. We're talking about it in the Greater Copenhagen, we're talking about it in the municipality, we're talking with our MPs nationally, but we're not seeing anything happening. This is a huge problem for us for now and for the future.
Agree with my Swedish colleague, and I've also been helping you criticizing your own party on that in Sweden, because we really need to do something in this agenda. And I think it's there's so many reports from OECD and from our own government showing that we need to do something with the hinderings, but nothing happens. So there's so many good rational arguments why to create common job markets, how this can help labor shortages, how this can actually raise the living conditions for many people in Europe. But there are some political obstacles against doing something. And that's something which is a huge problem in the big cities in Europe, in the capital regions. And I think maybe the resistance comes from the areas outside the capital regions, where there's a big resistance against open borders, open labor markets, all these kind of things which have something to do with globalization. And we can also see this in Denmark, even though Denmark is a very small country, but we have the constant debate about Copenhagen and the rest of the country, and the distance to Copenhagen from Jutland and from the other areas outside Copenhagen, and nothing must happen in Copenhagen which takes away something from the outskirts of the country. But the secret is that if Copenhagen is doing well, then the rest of the country is doing well. And I think every country in Europe is struggling with this agenda, that there's a battle between the capital regions and the rest of the country. And unfortunately, we cannot use rational arguments in this debate. It's all about feelings.
Very much. Again, you brought down the point that, and we get to this later a little bit, that perhaps even the best of evidence might not be sufficient. It requires something else: momentum, perception, feelings, relationships, local leadership. We had a dedicated session on this yesterday. You mentioned the point of sort of framework, enabling conditions, housing, right? When we think of geographic mismatch, we often think of jobs perhaps emerging in places that are not attractive. Larger cities such as yours are attractive, but they struggle with other issues like affordability and so on. So again, a mismatch in that respect. But I'd perhaps like to invite Maria to come in. So you present a more rural region. What are some of the difficulties that you face, and how do you try to attract workers, be it from other parts of Germany or from the world?
Yeah, actually we are a growing region, so we attract workers in our region. We have a lot of different projects. So, for example, we also go to tourists and try to promote our region, which is, of course, rural, but we have a lot of things to do. People living in North Rhine-Westphalia and bigger cities, they don't realize that the smaller cities 100 kilometers up north are also have entertaining things, even when there are not so many people living. And we are a lot on fairs, Messen, and trying to promote our jobs as well. We have also projects with students. So we have job buses, for example, to bring students into different companies and show them different jobs in our area. Sometimes they don't even know which opportunities they have. And we also try to promote our universities, and there are 2 of them in our region, to study there. Yeah, that's a short.
A massive effort on raising awareness, information campaigns, right? How do you work with the local employers on this front?
Yeah, we have in our association about 800 companies. We also have our own events to like networking platforms. We have a lot of big events where most of the companies are coming to interact with each other. But we also have smaller events like lunch meetings to bring companies together to interact with each other and to share ideas, for example.
Great, thank you very much. We touched upon the issue of up and reskilling, naturally, unsurprisingly so. Also, dual education, VET systems, etc. I would like to come back to both of those issues. In terms of re- and upskilling of the existing workforce, so that you mentioned the initiative from Malmö, which I think was called Job Tracks. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit for the benefit of the audience what type of jobs that targets, and what type of workers or job seekers are sort of the main target group?
We saw, I was contacted in the beginning by a few companies working with solar panels, and they made an analysis that they have to find people that can mount solar panels on roofs, and this is a branch that is growing in Malmö and in the country generally. So when they identified the problem, we decided to make sure that Arbetsförmedlingen, which is the state institution that is working with the unemployment questions, because the state has the main responsibility in Sweden. Then we have Arbetsmarknadsavdelningen, the entity that works with labor market questions within city of Malmö, who met and they decided to have a dialogue with this company on what kind of skills do you need in your company. And all of a sudden we found a few more companies too that were searching for solar panel mounting personnel. So all of a sudden they decided that this is the model, we need these kind of skills, and they created actually a course on training program which was approximately 12 weeks, And these companies that were part of the training courses, training program, said that, and they had an agreement with Arbetsförmedlingen and Arbetsmarknadsavdelningen that they will hire, and approximately 80% of the ones who went to these training programs got a job after 12 weeks. And not all job tracks that we have are 12 weeks. Some are approximately 24 weeks. But it all depends on what kind of skills that they need to retain to be able to do the job at the company. Also, so this is one example. And right now, I think we have approximately 5 to 7 job tracks within different branches. And what we are doing right now are, instead of working directly with one company, try to contact the branches, for example, see where is there a huge need of huge need to employ people, and have a dialogue and create new job tracks in our city. And this will continue. And my idea, and what would be great, is we have a huge unemployment rate in Malmö. Denmark needs to hire a lot of people. The most interesting could be if we could find common job tracks that we could create, but it's all about the rules. What kind of rules do we have in Denmark? What kind of rules do we have in Sweden? If we could find a solution, that would be the most optimal to create job tracks together with Copenhagen.
Would you like to come in to bring in the perspective of Copenhagen as a potential beneficiary of such joint job tracks? Or perhaps share your experience in the difficulties that you have in, for instance, bringing in people from Skåne?
I think there's two layers in this. There's the highly skilled, as the engineers you talked about, who can work from home. For them, it's attractive to work in Danish companies because of the much higher salaries, because of the huge difference between the Danish crown and the Swedish crown. So in that way, it might be easier to attract, also because in big international companies, the working language is English anyway. But where we come into troubles is when hiring people to the service sector, because that is also, I think, an increasing the language barrier between our countries. It used to be when I was a child. I mean, when you were a child, it was easier to understand each other. But now the young people, they don't speak Swedish and Danish together. They speak English together. So what we used to have in common is not so much in common anymore, and has actually turned into a barrier. So it's not as easy as it should be. But what we can do is to work with our governments on removing some of the barriers, but also to have programs in our municipality, but also in Sweden, in how to make it easier to integrate into our labor markets, and also to learn about the differences between our labor markets in Denmark and in Sweden. And in general, what we're trying to do is also to keep foreigners working in Denmark much longer. And that is certainly something to do with family policy, because you won't stay here if there's no job to your spouse. You also need to know how to integrate socially into the Danish society, which can be difficult compared to other countries where they're much better in providing the necessary space to expats. It can be difficult here because we are a bit more to the north. We are a bit more reserved. It's more difficult to getting close to the Danes. And there's also here a language barrier because everyone speaks English to a certain extent, and then we start to speak Danish when we are socializing between each other. So there's a lot of cultural codes we need to work with in order to keep more people here. And that's something we are actually investing in Denmark. But on the plus side, I think we also have something to offer, because Copenhagen is the place to settle with a family. We have good schools, affordable kindergartens, all these kind of things, which can be terribly expensive if you go to Paris or to London or to United States. Then it's extremely expensive to send your child into a daycare, but it's cheap here in Northern Europe. So if you want to stay here and have a good, safe family life, this is the selling point for Northern Europe. Whereas if you just go for the low taxes and things like that, it's all places. But we have something to offer to those who want to have a safe family environment.
Great, thank you very much. What we see in our work and across OECD countries and specific regions, that for a long time labor shortages at first were sort of concentrated among high-skilled workers. Global hunt for the same type of talent, medical professions, in the IT sector, and so on. Now, I think increasingly it's shifting downwards, right? It's affecting the whole spectrum of the economy. One of the toolkits that is at our disposal, but perhaps underutilized, sort of apprenticeships, vocational education training that can cater to some of these jobs that do not necessarily need higher education and so on. But despite of this, I mean, I guess overall across the OECD, the attractiveness of these career choices, career path has sort of been decreasing in most places. So based on anyone's review, what do you think would we need to do to make these choices, pursuing a vocational education instead of going to higher education, more attractive? And perhaps linking it to this, what would we need to do to make these education and training systems more adaptable, so adapt to the green and digital transition and the new reality of the skills that are required?
Maybe I can, yeah, I already talked about the job buses, what we are offering to students. We also have other different programs which we are going into schools and to just introduce different type of works in our area. And now I forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, and we also have a social media campaign. It's called Home Heroes. Heimathelden, and there we are interviewing mostly young people who are working in our area, mostly in vocational jobs, and they introduce the jobs and the benefits of the jobs. And I think in Germany we have so many different kind of jobs, and students don't even know that there are so many opportunities, and we try to bring this into public.
But I think the interesting thing is that if you take vocational training, then you will have almost job guarantee. You will have a very well-paid job. If you end up as a plumber, you will most certainly have a much higher lifetime income than if you have chosen to study communication or arts or any kind of other kind of university study. But this is not a selling point. Because everyone knows that there's a job guarantee, high salary. So I think we have to look more deeper into what is prestigeful in the society, and in this welfare model we have in Scandinavia, we have for many years, for decades, promoted that the good choice is to take a high school degree and then go into university. That was like the end goal of the welfare state. So we have a high proportion of our population and young people who go into the universities, take this university degree, but actually if you looked into lifetime income, you would be better off in other sectors, but that's not prestigeful. So it's also, I think it's something about changing what is prestigeful, and I think we have to look into other European countries like Switzerland, maybe also Austria, where a lot of people take the vocational training and less people take the university degree, because we need people with these kind of vocational skills and not only persons who have the university degree.
Jette, I saw you wanted to come in.
Yeah, it's because I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think it's where you put your focus, that's also where you will succeed. And I just can take it just internally in our own company, because it's not always super attractive to be out in the front line in the stores, but actually that's where everything is happening. So without the stores, without that transaction and the customers, none of us would have a job in the back office. And but that's how it is. And I think it's really, really important to start to talk about the importance of why we do things. And then also stay a little bit in the problems that we have, and then trying to solve them in a different way, because I think also sometimes we want to have quick solutions, but we need to talk about what are the long-term solutions that we also want to meet going forward.
I think both of you brought up the issue of prestige, reputation, I suppose validation, or I think we did. I think a fitting example is what happened during the COVID pandemic, where key workers, people we don't necessarily consider in our thoughts on an everyday basis, found sudden burst in their recognition, society recognition, because they did these essential services. Perhaps giving us a little bit more food for thought on how we should be considering these types of jobs, which are essentially the oil that greases the wheel in our economy more holistically. Again, coming back to this issue, that you mentioned on the up and reskilling, because you've brought in the issue of of the green economy. Do you see any interesting efforts either that you and your colleagues are taking locally, or that enterprises are taking to sort of shift and adapt dual education systems towards the new rising, emerging occupations that are in demand, or new skills that are required?
Is it working? Yeah. I think the companies are well aware of this. The municipality is well aware of the demographic changes, but I don't think that we are 100% aware of it on the national level, because we know, we have statistics that we have a low birth rate, just like in Japan. We are not taking on foreigners in our country, so the birth rates are low. At the same time, we have a mismatch within our society with what kind of jobs that are being created in comparison to what education level our citizens have. And this is a responsibility that the national government needs to address, because yes, we can do some things in the municipality. We can do it in Copenhagen. We can do it in Malmö, Helsingborg. But this is not a question about solving these questions in respective municipalities. And that's why I am all the time lifting up the national government. I'm taking the example of Skellefteå in Sweden, where this green industry was coming. But at the same time, there were no incentives for people to move to Skellefteå. You didn't have the housing, you didn't have the preschools that people are expecting to have when they move. There's no good transportation infrastructure of transportation to and from Skellefteå. So this is a larger problem, and no, we're not well aware of this huge challenge that is coming upon us now, but also in the coming 10, 15 years in our society.
Well, when we were talking about reskilling, I believe that one problem is, now I can only talk about our engineers and things like that. But what we see is that, and of course this is a special group on the labor market. But what we see is some of the skills that they've been relying on all their life are also changing. And you're been working with carbon vehicles, and now you're going to go to electric engines and things like that. And there is, in Sweden, we had actually a few years ago a very large effort to try to give incentives to reskill while you're at work, where you can get 80% of your wage, even up to quite high wages, and be free from your work and try to get to try to reskill and upskill and things like that. But what we see is also that there is a problem now that many companies they have. I mean, the competition is so fierce, and they don't have the time. It's not that they don't have the money to, you know, to let the people go and educate themselves and you know, upskill. But the problem is now that time is so tight, and also it's not only the company's problem, it's also our members' problems who are saying in surveys that, you know, 1/5 of them are saying that, well, in 3 years, I'm not sure I can do my work anymore. But they're still not thinking that, oh, but I don't have the time to go and reskill and upskill right now. I'll do it later when I get the time, and that is a problem.
Let's back on linking to this point, and perhaps also the point that Sid raised on a sort of awareness of the direction of travel. When we think of labor market intelligence, you know, the umbrella term, but data, evidence, support, information to firms, to employers, to public employment services, to local and national policymakers. What do you think sort of existing gaps, for instance? Now you mentioned the example of shifting skills requirements for engineers. I think the automotive sector is a primary example where you see an actification of jobs, a shift towards perhaps software developers, sort of mechanical engineers, etc. Do you think companies are aware of like all these needs? Would they need more, I think, support in terms of data and evidence to make choices to, but also link it to better training provision in the public service?
Let's say, I think the companies are quite aware of what they think will be their future needs, but it's not always the case that will be their future needs, and that is the problem. I mean, there is within the EU and so on, there talks about, okay, we should, you know, if we study job vacancies and see what they search for, we can adapt education and things like that. But the problem is, things are happening so fast. If you were looking at job vacancies in Sweden and you just go back 4 or 5 years, there were no one searching for battery engineers, you know. And then a year ago, everyone was saying the big problem is, why don't we have any battery engineers here? Why don't we have education for battery? And now, yesterday or so, Norfolk is, you know, cutting back extremely, and so. I mean, we don't know the future, so the most important thing is, you know, you have to have skills that are that you could be able to you know, adapt.
I think the use and exchange of data is very important. From my experience as an advisor to local government, I feel that in local government in Japan, the departments in charge of employment often do not have sufficient information about the industry. So they don't know the origin of labor needs. So and departments in charge of industry do not sufficient information about the labor market and skills development, especially skills development information in Japan. So I think frequent exchanging of information between the two departments is essential for the effective policy making.
Better flow of information, better exchange of information, more granular information. I think we heard timely information, because by the time we have it, it might already be changing or outdated. And until our responses come into fruition, there's already time lag, etc. Anything anyone else wants to mention? For instance, better information on target groups, or, you know, changing skills requirements.
Yeah. We can say that maybe for the companies, the analysis and researchers are not so as interesting right now as for us, for example. So we can go with these fundings to policy and politics to change things. But for example, we had a research about our region in 2008 for 2025, which said that there will be over 20,000 open vacancies
open jobs in our region, and that was something we could work on. And you can see we, as an association, we grew in the last years, and I think for us and for politics, it's very important to have research and analysis.
And I think Christian mentioned it before about when we make policies out of feelings and not facts and analysis that we are doing. And this is a huge problem in our society, because we have our organization which represents the municipalities and regions in Sweden, SKR, saying that until 2030 we will be needing more than 400,000 people working in our welfare system in Sweden. But at the same time, when we decide our policies within the politics, within the government, we close the borders. We don't do anything to give incentives to create, to raise the birth rates. We are actually sending people home back from Sweden in a bigger extent. The low level of immigration that we are seeing right now will continue. So the policies right now are built on ideologies and feelings rather than facts and proper analysis on what we need in our society today. And this is, for me, a huge problem that we need to address in bigger extent.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just looking around if anyone wanted to mention anything else. No? Okay, great. So we have a few minutes left, and we have plenty of microphones here today. So anyone who might want to comment or ask questions on anything that was said, or raise questions on some of the efforts that were mentioned in the private sector across the different places, has now the chance to do so. So don't be shy. I think there's a prize for the first question asked. Yes. Much for being courageous.
Thank you so much. Actually, Mr. Fujimoto, you presented the challenges of Japan. And to all of us, we are looking into the future by seeing the situation you are in. Have you any good advices for us, what you should have done, so that we can actually try to tackle the same demographic development and the challenges with the labor market and skills shortages? So is there anything you would have done differently, knowing the situation you are in now? And can you advise us how to actually tackle the situation?
I think the shortage of now Japanese in Japan now is unlike is now absolute, and it is not limited to some special organization or industry section. So not, but occur in almost most sectors. So this is because of degradation of people. So we are suffering from to keep enough labor force all over Japan. So this is several steps, several initiatives, policies. The main policy is to encourage senior workers to enter the workforce. if you listen to the Japanese situation, Japanese people must be crazy. We are going to the limit. The institutional limit to age have risen 60 to 65, and we aim to 75. 75 age, up to 75, 70. According to OECD definition, over 65 is not productive population. So in Japan, in 10 years, past 10 years, over 65 workforce increases 1.5 times. About 9 million people, 14% of all labor, of all workforce. So I think so. But the next step is to accepting foreign labor force, but Japan is have not never experienced the acceptance of immigrants. So I think Japan has to learn from European experience. So thank you.
Thank you very much. In a sense, it creates a sense of urgency that you share with us the experience of Japan. Anyone else who would like to use the opportunity to raise any questions? Yes, please. 2.
Thank you very much. A question to Jens Christian. You mentioned that you have about 43,000 young people without skills, education, and also with mental illnesses. Could you tell us a little bit more how do you address this problem?
It's 43,000 in whole Denmark. This I think it's called the NEED group in international terms. It's something which is really high on the agenda of the government because it's an increasing problem. What we have done here in Copenhagen is to focus on how to get these young people into education, but maybe also into job. Because part of the problem is that these young people have tried education. They have tried to pass the high school, mostly actually high school and not vocational training, but they have not passed, maybe dropped out after 1 or 2 years and not got back to education or job. And I think one part of the solution is to get out on the labor market to get a job and maybe take the education later, or if at any time whatsoever. And in this country we have had a strong focus on education and thought that everyone could go through the educational system. And I think that has been a mistake to a certain extent, because at all times there have been people having jobs, but with not having an education and certainly not a high school degree. But I think this has something to do with this welfare thinking of the Nordic countries, that you need to go to the primary school, of course, but also into the high school, because the high school used to be an upper class thing, and then in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it got a mass thing, so everyone should go through the high school. It was part of this welfare ideology. But it's not the right choice for everyone. For a lot of young people, it might be better to get into a job instead of trying to go through an education. You have both maybe problems with following the classes, but also where you actually get all these kind of mental issues a lot of young people are fighting with. So I think jobs is one part of the solution, but also to catch these young people much sooner than we have been able to do. And what we're doing here in Copenhagen is to make one entrance for this group of young people, because it can also be difficult to navigate in a huge, complex public sector where there's a lot of offers to young people with mental issues who are outside job market, who doesn't have an education. And what these young people need is one entrance and one person who is taking care of them, instead of this huge monster of a welfare system. It was a little bit political, but yeah.
Question there?
Yeah, I've got two questions, if I may, unless we don't have time. So, okay. So I would just ask one question around AI. So obviously it's a thing of now and the future. So I was wondering how you are considering AI in terms of reskilling, upskilling, and more generally the approach to labor market. Are you considering as a threat, an opportunity, and how it's been maybe used?
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm also responsible for social questions within my municipality. So, no, we don't see it as a threat, but there's a whole lot of knowledge that we need to get to be able to feel safe about using AI in our way of working. So I got information a few days ago that we have a lot of personnel that are actually attending AI courses to understand AI and the possibilities, but also be aware of the negative perspective of AI, because you have both things. So we are I think in the position right now where we are trying to understand AI and what it could give to us and which possibilities. And I think there are huge possibilities within the social area, for example, because for me, it's really prioritized for personnel within my organization to not sit with administrative things rather than do what a social worker should do, actually meet the citizens of our city. So we are in the beginning of this era or place of AI, but I see huge possibilities with that.
Thank you very much. There was a nice concluding word, really finishing on a positive note after I think we mainly alluded to the major challenges that I think a lot of people here in the room shared. So with this, we're actually coming to an end. Thank you very much. Thank you, esteemed panelists, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. Thank you for the questions. We'll be, I think, jumping and transitioning straight into the last closing session, the closing plenary, Embracing Change, Communities, Companies, and Career Transitions. Thank you very much.